Welcome back to another things. So it's kind of like a top 10 type video, but these are 8 things I love about DC Rebirth. Yep, it's been 16 months since this thing started. Correct? Uh, Actually, it's been more like 17 months, almost a year and a half. DC Rebirth has been going on. Now, these are things I do like. I do love that DC is doing with DC Rebirth. First thing, they do a better job marketing the books. Yes, that was actually one of the biggest problems with New 52 was the fact that books most of the time weren't marketed properly. If the title wasn't called, it was a Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, or Justice League title, or one of your really big name characters, the title it received very little promotion or hardly any at all. Nowadays, titles are getting better marketing. And that could explain why they're actually selling really well. Though, yeah. Okay, that's the first thing. Second, the trades are put together a lot better. Yeah, I should point out, though, there were several crossovers. Basically, DC did a terrible job putting into trades. What do I mean by this? Now, there were at least, with the exception of a few Batman events, generally, whenever DC did crossovers that basically crossed different books and had all the storylines connected, so like Superman Doom, Savage Dawn, Final Days of Superman, The Culling, let's see, what else was it? Trying to think. Oh, and Blight? Yeah, DC had this big problem of putting in like 1 or 2 parts of a crossover and not putting anything else in. They did this for these crossovers. Oh yeah, they did it for Trinity War as well. Like if you read like the first trade for Just Like America, I'm talking about not the current volume, but 2 volumes back, the one that lasted from 2012 to the one that lasted from 2013, 2014. Yeah, what they should have done with this particular thing, just have the opening 5 issues, the arc that pretty much is part of Forever Evil, and the last issue. There's a couple issues part of Trinity War, part of that trade. Here's kind of the thing. These issues should have been skipped over. Instead, they put them in the trade. My guess, DC is probably learning from Marvel that you shouldn't do that at all when it comes to books that are part of crossovers. Take a look at events like Narosha, Second Coming. Basically, anything deals with the X-Men. Take a look at their crossovers, or in the case of there was a couple of minor Dark Reign crossovers. One was a cross between Deadpool and Thunderbolts. The other was a crossover between the Dark Avengers and the X-Men. Yeah. Do you know what Marvel did with these issues? They actually didn't put these in the regular volume trades. They put them in one trade, and that's it. Though in the case of Utopia, they collected a second time in the complete Matt Fraction collection, but they chose not to put in stuff like the Dark X-Men New Beginning. I believe was also they didn't put in the X-Men Legacy issues, but generally they usually put the crossover stuff in one trade and have the regular trade just skip over, go to something else. Just if you want to read this particular crossover, read the crossover trade. This time DC has actually finally learned to correct their mistake, a mistake they have been making for 4 years. Not kidding about this. Take a look at something like The Culling, for example. In the second volume for Teen Titans, they collect 1 part of a 4-part story. They did the same thing for Superboy Volume 2 in the second volume of Legion Lost, where they collect 1 part of a 4-part crossover. They did the same thing with the 3 big Superman storylines, Doomed, Savage Dawn, and Final Days. They did the same exact thing, where these trades are just thrown together because, they're part of a story arc, even though that they're part of different chapters of a crossover. Like, in the case of X-Men, there were 2 trades that had no reason to exist at all. One was the last trade, Last Rights, which collected issues from 2 crossovers. Like, the first 3 issues, I reviewed this, where they collected those from Savage Dawn. Heck, they even collect the annual in that trade. And the annual for Action Comics started off that crossover. Excuse me. And yet, they put this trade together in trade? Yeah. they did for this one. I don't really get why, but they did. I think this is quite stupid. Like, couldn't they just, I don't know, not put this trade together and just end it with, like, after 7 trades? Yeah, the way Action Comics goes, with its 3 crossovers that it was part of, which was Doomed, Savage Dawn, and Final Days, you could at least had 7 trades. But nope. We had to put out 7 frickin' trades, despite the fact that, story-wise, this makes no frickin' sense at all. At least for Teen Titans, they only did this once. Action Comics did this 3 times. Superman and Wonder Woman, they did this one also 3 times. Batman Superman, they only did this twice. They did this for Final Days, and they did this for Superman Doom, because one of the issues was actually part of that crossover. Yep. Superman, as far as I can tell, they did the same exact thing for that one as well. Where, out of all 3 crossovers, they did the same exact thing. They collect 1 or 2 or 3 parts of the story and just think, oh yeah, it's part of the same story, even though it really isn't. The only one I can claim exception to this is Truth, because those are actual story arcs contained with the actual series. They're not, like, crossed over and anything else, despite the fact Truth basically was involving all 4 Superman books. This one I think is the exception, because it's a self-contained arc, not connected stories to other books. That's why the Truth is actually immune to this thing. But yeah, DC's done a lot better job with this one. Yep, where they put the issues of the crossover in one trade, and then when they come up next time for these trade series, they just go to the next arc. Or in the case of Nightwing, they just put the opening arc, which I believe is just 4 issues. I believe it is. Yeah, 4 issues. They skip over the 2 issues that are part of Night of the Monster Men, and they go to the next couple issues. Let's see. As far as I can tell, they did this also with Justice League, and they're going to do this with Suicide Squad as well for their next trades. But yeah, anytime you have issues that either tied in part of a crossover or connected as part of a crossover, they're in one trade, not like 3 or 4, which really made no sense at all. Because if you want to read Blight, you didn't have to pick up the trade that collected the entire Blight storyline, because it really made no sense. And some of these trades could easily have been cut down by at least 1 or 2, because they just collected just few parts of a story, despite the fact you can just get this one trade, which even though it's a little bit more than the other trades, you could at least pick this thing up and just move on. But God forbid we do that. But at least this time, DC's doing a lot better job with their crossover trades. Yeah, where at least a better job putting trades together. Yep. Alright. Number 3. Series lasting more than 6 or 12 issues. Yeah. Because a lot of the series that were parts of the New 52 had the tendency to not last too long. I'm not kidding. Like certain series. So you look at series like Mr. Terrific, or Blackhawks, or Hawk and Dove, or OMAC. Or here's one for you. How about Frankenstein Age of Shade lasting for like 16 issues? But that lasted a little bit longer, but it got canceled. Yeah, titles were being axed like crazy over the course of the whole time. Heck, some of these titles were axed after been lasting for not even barely a year yet, and yet they were being axed. Since Rebirth has happened, only 2 titles have basically ended. All-Star Batman actually ended a couple months ago. Superwoman is the next series to end. But as far as I know, there is no other series set to end. Excuse me. Number 5. No massive creative team book changing a lot. Yeah, this is something that I think is probably a brilliant stroke of genius. Because if you look at a lot of New 52 like if you look at, let's say, series like Superman, Action Comics, Green Arrow, like a lot of the really big titles, with the exception of Justice League, Batman, and Green Lantern, and of course Green Lantern Corps, a lot of the creative teams basically left at the end of basically about a year or 2, or at least not very long. In the case of George Perez, where he was on the book for 6 issues before he had to basically leave the book because of editorial interference. Yeah, at least in the case of this time, some of these writers just stay in for like a couple issues and then basically stay in for filler stories and then come right back. A good example of this is Superman, where Tomasi did the first 27 issues, well, at least I think like the first 28, but the last 4 issues have been done by at least 2 different writers, where you have these writers come in for a couple issues, and then the writer just comes right back. Yeah, the creative teams are not changing very often. Look at, let's say, Teen Titans. The only change that the creative team has had, just the artist changed once. The original artist, the artist who did the Rebirth one-shot, is not the artist who does the series. It's a completely different artist. So you can praise DC for not having massive creative teams change. The only other book I can think of that actually has had more than one writer aside from Superman lately is probably Justice League, because apparently Brian Hitch had trouble keeping stories about time, so they basically had these books basically for a brief period of time. Justice League became a filler book with fill-ins, with sort of filler stories in the case of Brian Hitch's run. But here's kind of the thing: the issues that Brian Hitch does not do are actually better than his issues, because his issues are boring. But yeah, no massive creative team. You don't have creative teams being forced out the book, like in the case of Batwoman. I mean, creative teams leave, like in the case of Greg Rucka, he left on good terms. He probably left because that's probably all the issues he wanted to do for Wonder Woman. He did 25 issues in one annual, which I'll get to Greg Rucka in a minute. But yeah, at least these people are actually lasting for a little bit longer than a few issues on these books, or maybe a year. Yep. Alright. Number 4, the events are built up a lot better. Yeah, the events are built up like 100% better. Because if you look at, let's say, all the other crossovers that DC had from 2011 to 2016, a lot of them had very little build-up, or actually no build-up at all. Converge is probably one of them. If you look at, let's say, books, if you look at all the crossover events so far that DC has done for Rebirth, which is Night of the Monster Men, Superman Reborn, The Lazarus Contract, what else is there? There is, Dark Knight's Metal. These events actually had a build to them. Though not really that much for the Lazarus Contract, but it's a lot better build than a lot of the other storylines have. I mean, in the case of the events that happened previously, what events actually had a build to them? Trinity War had a build to it. I know Darkseid War did. Probably just a continuation of Trinity War, so I kind of count as part of it. But not many of them. I can kind of count Nine of Valves as part of having a build-up, but at least at some, a lot of the build-up basically was very little, barely at all. Or in the case of some of the other one-shot crossovers that DC had for after the first 9 issues, they just happened because, well, they just felt like happening. These crossovers have a purpose, and they do have after effects, and they are affected in the books. Look at, let's say, Night of the Monster Men. Yeah, the Hits Comics and what actually dealt with this, but at least there was an aftermath to it, and at least the seeds were planted both in Batman and Nightwing. Detective Comics, the reason why it tied into it was because it wrapped the first story arc, which I'll get to that probably when I get the trade. But at least some of these storylines, when they do crossovers, at least there's a build, and at least one of whom actually deals with aftermath. The Lazarus Contract, this one actually, all 3 books actually deal with the aftermath. This actually is a rarity. And look at, let's say, Dark Knight's Metal. There was actually a build to this crossover. Because previously, when DC did crossovers, they hardly did any build at all. At least when they did some of the build, it was really bad build. Like in the case of Savage Dawn, where they just have a depowered Superman. And finding out that it's actually, this whole story leads into Savage Dawn. For some people, they found Savage Dawn to be pretty much a disappointment. I found the event to be okay. It wasn't terrible. Yeah. But that's another thing I do like about Rebirth so far. Next, of course, is more than a handful of good titles. Yeah. This is one thing also New 52 had a problem with. was the fact that not a lot of these titles were actually really good. Though, one title I can basically say of the first wave of titles that was actually pretty bad was Blackhawks. Because, one, it barely featured hardly any characters I recognize. I think it was like one reimagining of a character that was Lady Blackhawk, but she barely got any backstory. The only thing we got to know about her is how she lost her eye. But some of the other titles were actually pretty good. But for a lot of people, like I would say about half of the release titles were actually received with positive reception. The other half received with mixed or negative reception. In the case of currently, they're getting better reception, and currently as of right now, there's only 2 mediocre books published by DC, and that's just Cyborg and Justice League. Though Justice League is going to have a better creative team in the form of Christopher Priest, I don't remember who his writer is, after the Bats of Hell crossover concludes. But look at Brian Hitch's storyline. Random monsters, a virus, more random monsters, and then fighting children, people from the future. That's the gist of his whole run. Cyborg is running the same exact storyline since issue 1. But in the case of something like Aquaman, which kind of was accused of that, at least they had a brief break when they had 2 issues where he fought Shaggy Man. In the case of Cyborg, he spent the last 16 issues fighting the same bad guy, just a robotic version of his father, and yet this storyline is going to issue 1, and I kind of feel as though that this storyline is, well, it's finally going to end with the next issue, but this storyline's going for way too long. But it does have good artwork, but I kind of feel as though John Stampa was really dragging his feet with this storyline. But in the case of some of the other ones, some of the arcs that Rebirth has had, I think the highest they may go is maybe 5 issues. But can you think of any major storyline? The only one I can think of for arcs-wise actually was the longest arc in the past year was the first arc for Detective Comics. That was 7 issues long. But a lot of the other storylines, their first arc tend to last for 4-5 issues tops. But, yeah. There's that. Yep. Number 7. And this something is really interesting. Black Canary featured in not 1, not 2, but 3 titles. Yeah. This is actually something because usually when we think of a character in more than 1 title, or at least 1 or 2, is Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Now you're going to add Black Canary to that list because she's featured in 3 titles. She's featured in Green Arrow, Batgirl, and Birds of Prey. Don't think she missed 1 or 2 issues, but she's featured regularly in that book. And Justice League America. 3 books. When was the last time you see Black Canary ever do this? I mean, the highest she may go is maybe 2 books, but number 3. This is something. This is actually a pretty good maneuver on the part of DC, and the fact that they're writing her a lot better than she was previously. Okay, and the 8th and last thing, the return of Christopher Priest and Greg Rucka. Greg Rucka, when he did Wonder Woman, this was the first regular work he's done, with the exception of the 2-issue miniseries for Convergence that happened 2 years ago. When he started doing Wonder Woman last year, it was the first time he did a regular book in 6 years. Yeah, first regular work, except for just like a brief miniseries. Excuse me. And for Christopher Priest, I looked it up. When he started doing Deathstroke, this was the first DC book he's done in 16 years. The last time he did a book for DC was Legends of DC Universe back in 2000. Yeah. And what had he been doing? He's working for Marvel the whole time. Yep, a lot of time working for Marvel, using independent stuff. But bringing back Christopher Priest DC was probably a brilliant stroke of genius on the part of DC to do. And, of course, bringing back Greg Rucka, one of my favorite writers. And a guy who actually I met last year at Comic-Con. I met him at, I think I met him at MegaCon, I believe it was MegaCon Tampa I met him at. Yeah, it was MegaCon Tampa. That's where I officially met the guy. Nice guy. And I love the fact I got a chance to meet him. Wait, it was MegaCon. Actually, just this year I got a chance to meet him at MegaCon Orlando. Yeah, for some reason he remembered because I tweeted him because I had missed him the day I went because he was sick that day. So I tweeted him that I missed him. Hopefully see him. And of course he came to MegaCon Orlando and he surprisingly remembered me. So I'm hoping to see Christopher Priest at future Comic-Con because I would love to give him sign my my Deathstroke trade that I own. That the first volume of Collectors. I'm hoping to get my hands on the second trade really soon. Okay, but Maybe I get a chance to Greg Rucka in the future. I hope so. Maybe it'll come this year to MegaCon. Maybe come to next year's MegaCon Orlando. Who knows? Okay, so that's it. Stay tuned for more videos. I do have a comic corner coming out. I'll probably have to do it tomorrow. I only got one book ready to go right now, but I'll do the next comic corner tomorrow. Okay. But until then, I will see you there. Bye.